In the run-up to what has been described as a watershed election 30 years into South Africa's democracy, we continue to highlight important factors that play a key role in an election. Now, today we speak to political analysts about the importance of political manifestos and, more importantly, how the electorate can hold political parties accountable based on their promises penned in these manifestos. Now, for this discussion, we're now joined via video link by political analyst Sanusha Naidoo. Sanusha, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. But let's then pose that very question to you. You know, when you consider the number of political parties participating in this election alone, I mean, how important are manifestos in the run-up to the elections, and what really should the electorate zone in on in order to be informed by the party's vision and what realistically that party can achieve?
Good afternoon, Nati. Good afternoon to Prof and to the viewers. I think election manifestos are really important framing documents of what the political parties seek to achieve in terms of the election, in terms of the kinds of policy instruments, the policy frameworks that they want to shift the needle on, particularly around what they see as critical issues that affect the electorate and affect the body politic of the state. So they kind of give you a framing of their intention, their objectives, their goals, and their pursuits. But what it also does is that it gives the voter and the ordinary kind of citizen, in terms of when they read those manifestos, and of course you need to break down those manifestos because not every one of the citizens in the country who are voting age can actually go and want to read it. They are long, lengthy documents. They're kind of very detailed in some areas, and they're kind of very scant in others. So you need some kind of breakdown of that. And I think some new media houses have decided to start breaking down the key messaging that comes out of these manifestos. And that's the point of departure here, is what are the key messages? And you can see that there's a common set of goals and principles, values, common set of issues that all political parties are talking about. But they're trying to convince the electorate that my roadmap or my policy framework of how I'm going to achieve, whether it's GDP growth, whether it's employment, whether it's around addressing the electricity deficit, the other kind of institutional deficits, the question of crime, the question of safety. I mean, it's a whole host of issues around healthcare and other service delivery issues. What they do is that they try to project what is it that they are going to do, that if they are going to come into power or in some kind of coalition arrangement, that this is where they're going to kind of shift the mantle on issues. What I find very, very interesting about all of these political manifestos is that the one thing is that it's very transactional. Vote for me and I will do this. So that transactional approach to these kinds of manifestos creates an impression in the minds of the electorate. It's almost your pre-electoral social contract that comes out in these manifestos. And that kind of contract is that if you trust me with your vote, then of course we will actually do this, this, and this, because this is what I'm going to do. And I think I've seen one or two billboards and one or two election manifesto posters, which kind of make very high-level promises to the electorate. I mean, I remember in '94, the ANC's election poster, and I was a student then, was essentially 1 million homes, 1 million jobs, peace, and other stuff. Now, that's very transactional, because in a way what that does is that gives you the sense that, you know, I can change the policy environment. I can shift markets. I can do this. But what they don't really tell you is the how, the implementation plan. The roadmap is one aspect of this process of electoral democracy. The other aspect of it is, how do you get to do this in the context of institutional reform? How do you get to do this in terms of the promises you make? So I think I don't want to keep emphasizing this, but it can be very transactional. And at times, I think the accountability that you want the citizenry to have is that I think you're seeing it now, where there's a frustration, there's a trust deficit, not just with certain political parties, I think across the political spectrum. And the accountability is the tiresomeness that people are feeling, that I've heard this narrative all before.
Thank you so much for that. Prof, let me bring you in and, of course, take this time to also welcome Professor Lesiba Teffo to this conversation. Prof, just given that, you know, there have been some changes within the electoral, system, the political landscape even, just give us a view on what key priorities political parties then need to do and to include in their manifestos, especially given, to the state of the nation currently? And I mean, some of those challenges, the high unemployment, the energy crisis, the water challenges that we're also facing. Please unmute for us, Prof. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much for having me, Sanusha, and the listeners and the viewers as well. Look, I don't want to repeat what she said. And she said what I would have said anyway. We are in the same space together. So lest I become redundant. Because one, what is a manifesto, right? It's about policies and aims. In a small society like us, we have got about 400 political parties with different manifestos. It's like a beauty pageant, right? Look at me. I'm smarter than X or Z. There's no content there. But what is worrying to me is that I don't hear them address what matters most that can take us forward. And I don't want to repeat what was said and what is glib and out there. Most of them, if not all, I understand there is unemployment. And this is about getting employment with cushy packs. And it's not peculiar to South Africa. Hence, we have so many almost everybody wants to be a president. We've got so many political parties. A society like us, 5-10 times smaller than Britain and Europe, where there are 2 or 3 at most parties. It is that type of debate that the electorate must engage, rather than be worried about the beauty pageants. It is who says something different that appeals to me than regurgitating. And you want to create 5 million jobs. Why not 1? Why not 10 million? Explain to me why and the how part of getting there. But it's like, yes, is the English that matters, or the who behind the expression that matters, rather than the substance? And that's where I get concerned. There are issues to talk about, and I'll get to that at a later stage, that would have most probably can resonate with the people. We know why we are here. We know. We know that if we address the question of migration, that can make a difference in this country. We know that if we change the Electoral Act in a meaningful way, not the way they're tinkering with it, but in the way Van Silslabert spoke about, Vali Musa spoke about, we can move forward. We know that we are here because of the tender system. We know we are here because of cadre deployment.
And
you hear them talk about that? No.
And Prof, I want to take this opportunity to actually have you mention some of those. I mean, this is a question I want to pose to both of you. Just given that this is also a year where the country is marking 30 years of freedom, one gets a sense that the governing party is trying to strike a balance in its manifestos between marking what it calls, the strides and the successes over the past 30 years that were made, and also obviously looking at the challenges. But when you look at the opposition parties, they've positioned their messages vastly different. I mean, it's clear from them that this country, it needs rescue, it needs action, it needs land. So, Prof, please take us through those priorities that needed to, be addressed.
By all means, the country needs to be fixed. No doubt about that. The country needs to be fixed, to be rescued from the compradors. You have got thieves and charlatans masquerading as politicians. There are good people, by the way, even in the ruling party, who have been chucked and shunned, renounced and denounced. If appointed, they could have made a difference. And this is, we are where we are precisely because we don't want to be brutally honest with ourselves and even with our own leaders. And we are not lying to anybody, but lying to our own selves. I mentioned at least 5 points that if the ruling party had addressed, then when some of us raise them, they wouldn't be where they are. And they acknowledge that. They do. But unfortunately, it's late in the hour. Then you go to the opposition, right? They are almost, we are going to do exactly what we are doing, but in a different way. Let's just take the DA on migration, right? The DA on the tender system, the DA on on cadre deployment, right? I don't hear them coming out very strong. But there is a point I think I've mentioned here that I don't want to lose sight of. Somebody who's going to talk to me about reducing the provincial governments. Remember when we went out, we were campaigning for the reduction of the government structures that existed then. There were 7 in all. Instead, we have added 2 more. Now they are 9.
Yeah.
Tell me, what is the role and the effect of a premier or an MEC? What will not happen in the absence of a premier of an MEC? How much money you would have saved or you can save if you were to get rid of that layer?
Prof, let me pose the same question
that I want us thinking.
Prof, sorry, let me pose the same question then to Sanusha, given the fact that we are going to be fast running out of time. Sanusha, which then doesn't come as a surprise, that you have a declining democracy, as we're told, and that, you're hearing of stories where, the youth have been told that they have voter apathy.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think Prof is, I don't want to be reiterating what Prof is saying. He just put it out there, and it's really what I also concur with him on. But the challenge is that the youth probably are not going to be sitting there and reading those manifestos. They want to see action. They want to see what's going to change their life now. They want to know that when they're voting for a political party, their material circumstances are going to change in a much more faster way than let's wait until we sort out our kind of power sharing and our kind of issues and go forward. And I think the problem here is you spoke, Nati, about the ANC and the ruling party's manifesto versus the manifesto of all the other political parties. There's no difference between them. In fact, they're saying the same thing, but just in a way that's a roundabout. On for example, when you look at the issue of foreign nationals, some political parties are much more explicit about monitoring our borders, keeping foreign nationals out. Other political parties are much more cautious, much more sedate. But at the same time, the real issue is we need to actually ensure that we have economic development for our own nationals first. So there's a whole lot of things there that I think we have to be careful of, because I think what political parties are doing is telegraphing messages from polls, telegraphing messages from other spaces to try and fit their manifestos into what they think the electorate wants to hear. What political parties need to have a wake-up call on is that the electorate is no longer wanting to hear the same old, same old. I think people are becoming much more sophisticated, much more frustrated about political parties. That is why what's really important in looking at the poll data is the number of uncertain voters in this election, the number of apathetic voters in this election. Because if they're not sure where they're going to put that X on 3 ballot papers, and I completely concur with Prof that we need to not tinker with the electoral amendment thing. We need to do a substantive reform of our electoral system. And so in that way, I think that is why political parties are in conflict with each other, because they're all fighting for a very small pool of the votes.
Prof and Sanusha, we need to wrap. Sanusha, you are on the platform still. Just 30 seconds in terms of what are some of the indicators, at this point in time that are telling you, based on the manifestos, where we will see, some political parties partnering with some. Of course, we know that if the ANC does indeed come under 48% or 45%, it will go into coalition with some other party. But just 30 seconds in terms of what we're likely to see in as far as a coalition government is concerned.
I think for me right now, this coalition is transactional. I keep using that term. It's not about the election issues. It's not about people's lives and livelihoods. It's about how political parties want to actually shape this the coalition for their own interests. So don't expect that they're going to go in because suddenly they had a moment of a transformation agenda and said, oh, we're thinking about the people here.
Prof, 30 seconds, just your take in terms of what we're likely to see in terms of coalition government?
Look, I'm one of the advocates of that 10, 15 years ago, before people even knew what that meant. And all I'm saying, if it is about the other and not the self, coalitions work. But not in South Africa, not in Africa, if I were to extend that, because it is about the self and not the other. I raised this a few years ago to say some were not even aware that Angela Merkel was leading a coalition government because the system worked so well. It was about the public and being public-spirited about saving the other and not the self. And I'm saying even in South Africa, we will mature with time, because many political parties that I see today are going to be humbled after the elections, and they might begin to say, they speak the language we speak, change the Electoral Act, and at the same time, ensure that we serve the other and not the self.
Fantastic. Professor Lesiba Teffo and political analyst, Sanusha Naidoo, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. Of course, our guests there unpacking the importance of political manifestos and, more importantly, how the electorate can hold political parties to account.